So another Patreon Q&A. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support and for your questions. And I want to thank also PathSet, JP Lab, Kaitomic, and Flag for donating your commercial collections to the monthly giveaways we do on Discord. If you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord. Again, monthly giveaways, monthly challenges, and a lovely community. If you are not a Patreon, consider joining our community on Patreon. Monthly Q&As, lots and lots of extra content. And let's really start. So the first question is from Chris. Are there modules or examples where you can use an Aftertouch keyboard? So yes, there are modules. I sent you already a few examples. Unfortunately, I don't have a keyboard at the moment that has also Aftertouch. But the MIDI to CV module from VCV has a dedicated Aftertouch output that you can use to control filters, wavefolders, frequency of LFOs, and so on. And just in case, if you have also an MPE controller, you can use the MIDI polyphonic MPE controller module from Models, which has also channel Aftertouch. So again, you can use this to control filters, frequencies of LFOs, timbre in all sorts of ways. With Aftertouch. The next one is coming from Neil. Have you ever done a walkthrough on one of your published songs? Not to give away any signature trade secrets, of course, but I think seeing how you go from module selection to tweaking sounds to composition, finally to mix would be fantastic. Furnace of Stars is so good, and I wouldn't mind hearing some of your thoughts on that one. Thank you, first of all. So I guess that a walkthrough of one of my published songs. So there are on Patreon for all tiers, there are walkthrough videos of many patches that I built and recorded, also in hardware. There are also patches there that I recorded in hardware and walkthrough videos. If you are interested, go have a look. There are also live streams, also on Patreon, where I mix tracks that I recorded. I mix them in Reaper, so you can see also the mix process. Actually, I finished them basically. They're mix and a sort of master, if you will. So you can also see the process and the workflow there. And any live stream where I build a patch, you can see my workflow where I choose modules and stuff like this in VCV. In hardware, it's different because you don't choose modules, I guess. You have the modules in the case. But yes, there are walkthrough videos of everything there. About Furnace of Stars, this was a long time ago. One of my first albums with VCV rack. From the album Cosmic Foundry. So the Cosmic oscillator I used there in VCV rack, which was available back then in a phase distortion oscillator. And the Foundry sequencer from Impromptu, which is still available and still amazing. So this was the inspiration. Basically, back then I had a really old laptop with Windows 97 even. So I couldn't run bigger patches. So the patches themselves were really small, or relatively small, let's say. And I recorded everything live as a stereo track. So left and right from VCV rack directly, no multitracking, no anything. And I used the MIDI controller with faders and knobs to play or to perform the patch live. So all of the tracks from this album are recorded live while I perform them, bringing voices in and out, filters, just like I'm doing now. I'm still doing the same because I like it. Yeah, so this was more or less the workflow there. Again, this was inspired by the Cosmic Oscillator and the Foundry sequencer. Relatively small patches performed live, and then maybe on 2 or 3 tracks, I don't remember anymore, it was really a long time ago. I had back then the Neutron from Behringer, and I overdubbed it in a few places as a sort of a dirty lead sound, I guess you can hear it there, with lots and lots of slew or glide or portamento, which was always fun. So this was more or less the workflow on that particular album. But again, there are live streams where I mix tracks, and there are walkthrough videos of VCV patches that I recorded and hardware patches that I recorded, and they are all available for all tiers on Patreon. The next one is from Adrian. I have made with a JW a sequence that has 4 different arpeggios. I would like to make some polyphonic pads using the same harmony from the sequencer. It would be possible in some way by using the volt per octave output, or should I try anything different? So I sent you an example already, but I have an update on it, so you might find this interesting. Okay, so here we have the sequencer that you spoke about, right? The grid sequencer in this case. And you have 4 different rows playing sorts of arpeggios, right? It will sound like this. Right? Basically 4 times different rows. And the example I sent you involves a shift register. So basically you send your sequence into a shift register, and the shift register will sample the sequence and will also shift it downward. Right, so now we have the 4 different notes sort of in the buffer of the shift register. And if you use this as a polyphonic signal, as I'm doing here, you will get chords. Now the update here is that with this technique and anything else you will try, the shift register has to know the notes first. So everything will be delayed by 4 steps, because up until the 4 steps are playing, the shift register or the voice you are using will not know the notes. You can use other sequencers, but in this case, you have to delay the chord by 4 steps. So you get the chord from the 4 steps. So you will always have delay. Even if you don't delay it, you will always have some sort of a few steps that the chord will have to learn the notes, basically. I hope it makes sense. So here I'm using a gate delay, basically, right, to delay the gate by 4 steps, and then sample and hold to sample this polyphonic pitch after the notes have played, right? So it will sound like this. Right, so we get chords from this sequence, but again, we have to wait until all notes have played for the chord to know what notes to play, basically. Right, so this is sort of the update. But I have another solution. It will also be delayed. It will always be delayed. But I have another interesting solution. There is the adaptive quantizer that will act as a quantizer for incoming pitch. It will detect the pitch that comes into it and will output. It can also output a chord. Right, so if I use this pitch information from the sequencer to the reference CV and the gates to the reference gate, have a look at what happens. It detects the notes, right? The notes change, and it will detect which notes are playing, which are playing more, which are playing less. And then you have here a chord output that then you can use, if we use it for this here. Right? It's a bit jumpy, but there is no way around it because it has to learn the notes, and this takes time. Right, but this is another interesting solution that you can use using the adaptive quantizer from Impromptu. Again, you send the pitch and the gates to it, and it will adapt. It will learn the notes from the sequence. And then you can either use it as a quantizer or you can use it to generate chords, basically. The next question is from Celeb Charles, I guess. Since NIST is out of commission until it becomes compatible with the ARM chip on Mac, do you have any recommendation for a poly audio recorder? So yes, I found something very interesting with a looper from Lilac. Now I tried it, it works, but I didn't try it with really long recordings. So please, if you try this out and it works or it doesn't work, please report back in the comments or on Patreon or whatever. And let us know if it really works with long recordings also, but it does work also with multi-tracking, and it's quite interesting. The Lilac from Looper, of course, available for free. So I have here 3 loopers, of course, because we have 3 outputs. We have the 1 to 8, we have the 9 to 16, and we have the group and auxiliary. Right now you want to trigger them at the same time, so everything is in sync. So you use the trigger, for example, from the new push module, right, to trigger the recordings of 3 of them with one button, so they are all working the same. Now, the Lilac looper is a looper, but have a look in the right-click menu. You have here, first of all, the file setting for the export. You have WAV that you can use, or WAV. You can choose the bit depth, and you can choose also the polyphony, if it will sum the polyphony, or if it will multitrack the polyphony. So you will get, basically for each of them, you will get 16 channels, or 16 mono channels, or 8 stereo channels, right? So you can basically multi-track record with it. Now the result you will get 3 WAV files or WAV files that have multiple tracks in them that you will have to sort of explode, I guess, if this is the term. I'm using Reaper, it's really not a problem. You right click it and you click explode and you get 16 mono channels that you can then use as a stereo pair, panned left and right. So you can multi-track record with it. It works really well. It's stable, it's CPU friendly, and it will multi-track your recording. So please, if you use this, I tried it with shorter recordings, but if you use this and you have 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes recording and it works, please let us know. The next one is from Philip. Would it be possible to connect an external clock to the Behringer 960 sequencer? I cannot find any info on how to do this, as I'm planning to buy one maybe. So the short answer is no, you cannot use an external clock. I don't have this sequencer, but I did some research, and you cannot use an external clock with it. That said, you can trigger it externally, which means we have here the shift function, which will shift the sequencer step by step. And you see there is also an input here. There is a button that you can use, but also an input that you can use for external triggers, gates, clock signals, I guess, that you can drive the sequencer one step at a time, but I don't believe that it's like using an external clock, because there are all sorts of different features here that I'm not so sure that will work, like the skip and stop and all sorts of things, and also the clock multiplication. So the answer is no, you cannot use an external clock with it, but you can trigger it externally. The next question is from Bill. I'm trying to come up with a rationale for constructing a hybrid VCV Rack 2 plus eurorack hardware setup to do ambient music. I can see that some hardware modules are more fun to play live when I have access to the physical knobs, but on the other hand, I could just add more MIDI controllers with knobs and get a similar experience with VCV modules. Any thoughts, opinions, advice? Okay, so I started out with a hybrid setup. I used the ES3 and ES6 from Expert Sleepers, and then I moved on to the ES9, which I'm still using, and I still sort of have a hybrid setup. I'm using a Bitwig now, but I'm not... Okay, so there are a few things to keep in mind. Okay, first of all, there is something that's... And this will work the same with the ES8, and this will work the same with any other interface, because this is just how things work. So there is a thing that's called latency, and it's very, very annoying and uninspiring. Basically, you send one signal from one place to another. There will always be some sort of delay, latency, depending on your setup, depending on your settings of the interface of the computer, of whatever. There is always latency. So if you need to do stuff that are rhythm related, you will have to deal with it. There are workarounds, there are ways around it, there are ways to fix it. I know in Ableton, in Bitwig, there are ways to fix this stuff. I gave up a long time ago, not because it's not possible, but because it's just not fun. When you want to work on music, you don't want to deal with latency and I don't know what. You just want to concentrate on composition and music, on sound design and so on. So first of all, there is latency. So if you do rhythmic stuff, if you want things to be but you want them to be in sync, you will have to deal with it. Another thing to keep in mind is sending sequences and pitch information. Again, this is the nature of things. It's not because of the ES9, it's not because of the ES8, it's not because of any other interface you use. This is just how things work. You will have to calibrate your hardware oscillators. For example, if you want to send sequences from VCV Rack, pitch sequences, Never mind if they're even generative, not in sync, never mind no latency, but if you want to send pitch information from your computer out into hardware, you will have to calibrate, or let's say 99.9% chances are that you will have to calibrate your hardware oscillators. Now, first of all, it takes time and it stops you from composing. But let's say that this works, okay? I never had luck with it. And also on this, I gave up a long time ago. But let's say that you can calibrate them and it works perfectly on the first try. But imagine this, imagine you start with a patch, you build a voice, you had modulation, you had effects, you had whatever, you have a whole chain going on, you love this voice. And now you have to disconnect many things. For example, if you have FM, if you have all sorts of timbre modulation on the oscillator itself, you have to disconnect all of this and you have to send it to calibration and then connect it's just, again, it's not that it's not possible, but it's just, I'm not so sure it's worth stopping everything you do and stopping your flow. I know that for me, it's not worth it. I never liked it. It's possible you can do it. If you want to have a really small case and use VCVREC for most things, you can do it. But just keep these things in mind. It's not perfect. It's not the best setup out there. There are so many people who have a hybrid setup. I don't know how they do this. I don't know how they deal with everything. But I gave up a long time ago on this. But as I mentioned, I still have I'm looking there all the time because it's here. I still have the ES9. I still have a sort of hybrid setup, and I use the ES9 to multi-track things for my case into Bitwig, but I'm also sending modulation out from Bitwig, and I send voices out from Bitwig to process in the case. So for example, if I have a voice going on and I used all of my envelopes or looping envelopes or all of my LFOs or all of a sudden I don't find a noise source and I used all of my oscillators to patch one, I can use Bitwig to send out noise, to send out modulation. And it's quite cool because especially in Bitwig, it's also a modular system. You can modulate in Bitwig the LFOs to modulate the LFOs and then send it out. You can set exactly the range you want. So it's really helpful. I think a hybrid setup is really worth it. If you think of it, first of all, if you record things in the computer, multi-track record, I think the ES9 is definitely worth it. Maybe the ES8 is enough for you. I think the ES8 has only, I guess, 8 channels that you can send to the computer. I never had it, I don't know. But the ES9 has 14 channels, that's 7 stereo channels or 14 mono channels or any combination of them that you can multi-track in the computer, which is great. For me, it works really nicely. And also you have 8 channels to send signals out. So you can send, again, modulation. Imagine you want a specific LFO movement, a synced LFO that will always run in sync or will always be triggered or in one point or envelopes or stuff like this. So you can send out modulation. So if you think about a hybrid setup as a sort of filling in the gaps, I think it can work unless you need tight rhythms, so you don't want to deal with latency and you don't want to deal with pitch information. If those two things are not so important for you, then I think it's worth it. If those things are super important to you, then I think it's not worth it. That's my opinion. You can try and see for yourself. Maybe you have the time, maybe you have the patience, maybe it's not so important for you. So you can give it a try. Yes, and that's it. I want to add another thing. Lately, I've been dealing or using Bitwig a lot to make more rhythmic music. Maybe if I remember, I will put a link in the description to where you can find this music, which is much more rhythmic. And what I'm doing, someone helped me build a patch in the grid in Bitwig that sends out a clock that is super, super tight and it works and everything is in sync because it's just a clock signal. I'm not sending sequences. I'm not sending gate sequences. I'm sending a clock. So this works for me. But again, this is just with Bitwig, I guess, and this is just with a clock. without sequences and stuff like this. So this might work, but again, everything else, latency with sequences, pitch information and stuff like this, you have to think about these things if it's worth it or not. I know this was a long answer, but I have something else to say about MIDI controllers. MIDI controllers are great. I use them all the time. The problem with MIDI controllers in comparison to hardware modules is that with MIDI controllers, you have to think what you want to do, what you want to map. If you have a filter, you will not map all of the controls of the filter. You will map probably two controls, which is the resonance and cutoff, for example, or the drive and cutoff. But in hardware, you don't have to think about what you want to do. You just reach there and grab it. Because you don't have to think about what to map and what you want to use. So there is a difference with MIDI controllers, but they are quite helpful if you want to save money, if you want to save the stress of dealing with a hybrid setup. So you can start with MIDI controllers and see how you like the tactile experience. If someone is watching this and has a hybrid setup with pitch information and with latency and everything is working and it works amazing, please leave a comment and tell us how you did it and how it works and how you like it. And that's it. The next one is from Kyle. Can you share some techniques to make drum sounds more snappy and aggressive? I've tried many different drum modules, from the Volt ones to Hora to the VCV collection, and I always find my drum sound weak or flat. Snares sound washy and kicks sound flumpy or just like some sort of laser beam. I want the deep thuds and cracks I hear in other music, and when I try enhancing the sounds with stuff like wave folding, distortion, saturation, compression, it ends up overloading the mixer or the output. Anytime I get close to more aggressive sounds, I'm usually chasing and reducing the volume or gain usually ends up with the drums getting buried in the mix. What's the secret to good aggressive snappy drum sounds? Okay, so first of all, I don't think there is a secret. I think each track has its own processing, I guess. But I have a few ideas that you can try. I'm not an expert on this in any way. If you have something from me that you listened to and you liked, and you think, oh, the drums sound good there, let me know. And I will tell you exactly what I did there. But I don't have a secret, and I'm not an expert on drums whatsoever. But there are a few things that you can try. First of all, before I mention this, in VCV Rack there is the dim button here on the mixer. Activate it. This will give you more headroom. This will basically lower everything. In this case, I think I have it by 12 dB. Let me see. Yes, dim gain 12 dB, right? And it will give you more headroom that you can add distortion and saturation and everything without overloading the mixer. So have this dim button. It's on my patches it's always by default on. Okay, so I have a few things you can try. First of all, you mentioned that you try a few sounds. So selecting the sound is probably the most important thing, I guess. If it doesn't sound right at the beginning, then you will have to work a lot to change it. So selecting the sound is important. I have a few drums, right, with tremor 2 and tremor, and I have a bass. Never mind now the other sounds, I just want to concentrate on the drums, but right, this is the patch. Okay, now let's say that I want the kick drum. I want to select a different kick drum, or I want the kick drum to sound different. Instead of processing what I have, maybe selecting a different sound will be better. Here in this case it's from Tremor 2. Let's listen just to the kick drum. Right, some sounds will sound better to you, some sounds will sound not so nice to you. So you have to select. Let's say that I will change this. Listen to the difference between the modules. This is the VCV one. Sounds totally different. This is kick all, which I never use as a kick drum. Right, I use it as a bass usually. And there is knock also from Volt. They all sound really different, especially in context. Right? So first of all, choose your sounds. Okay, this is the first thing that will maybe help you. The second one is volume. you can mix the sounds differently to make the drums pop out a bit. So let's say we start with the kick. I will take everything down, right? And let's say that the kick is the most important element that I want to keep up, right? So this I will start with it, and I will start raising the other sounds. I will start raising the other sounds more and more, but not overloading or not overwhelming the kick drum, right? Right, basically getting a nice mix of the drums and then adding the other voices. Right, look at this mixed. Before they were all at 0, right, but now they are not at 0 anymore. Now the kick drum is the loudest, I guess. Right, and I sort of have a better mix. Now everything sounds a bit lower in volume because I lowered the levels, and I think this is also something always to keep in mind. In my opinion, subtractive mixing, taking stuff out, is always better than adding things. Instead of instead of making the kick louder, make everything else lower. It will just give you more headroom, and then you will not face issues like clipping and distortion and stuff like this. The next thing you can try is parallel compression, or I think it's called New York compression or whatever. So you can parallel compression the drums, which I will show you in a second what it means, and this will give them a bit more character. So I have here with a mind meld mixer, that's not a problem. I have them going, you cannot see this unfortunately because of all the cables. And let me move this, right? You can see here they are all going to group 1, the drums, right? So I can process this group with a mind meld mixer. I believe there is already a video about this. I just recorded the video about this, so you can have a look. Right, so group 1 will come out from the polyphonic inserts, will go to unmeld, unmeld will go to meld, and meld will go back to the group auxiliary. This is the way that you can insert effects inside the chain, and in this case on the group of the drums, right? And now what you do, and by the way, also in this case, I'm not going to do this, but I really recommend doing this. If you are using the inserts, I recommend not changing the levels on the fader. I recommend changing the levels on the gain adjustment, because this will change the levels that go to the inserts. I hope it makes sense. If not, let me know, I'll explain this again. Okay, so now I can send this group to a compressor. Right, and let's solo for a second just the drums. Right, so now they are going to a compressor. Now I'm going to use an aggressive compressor, as they say, right? So let's say 8-to-1, not such a long attack, but we will change this also. Take the threshold a lot down, really squash them. I can bring back the level. Right, and try to make them more snappy. This is after, before, right? Right, really try to crush them with a compressor, and then I take the mix all the way down, and this is parallel compression. I do this in parallel. We have dry and wet, so I start adding the compression and then listen to how it sounds like. Right, just to make them a bit more snappy, again, without and with. Right, again, this is really quickly. You can do this for hours and get really nice results. Not for hours, but a bit longer, and get nicer results. But listen now to the drums. They are already a bit snappier, I guess. Right. Another thing that I really like doing is mid-side processing, and this I do in VCVRack for the whole chain. Right, mid-side, basically you will get everything that's in the middle that is the same, and everything that's in the sides, in the stereo fields, that is different than one another. So what I do, I take the master output and I send this to the mid-side module, and then back right to the output. Right now nothing happens because I don't have any processing. So what I will do, I will send the mid, which is everything that's the same, which is probably the kick drum, the snare and stuff like this, and the bass. Right, this will go to saturation and again compression, and then back to the mid. And now I can start saturating the sound. And again, we have a lot of headroom, but keep in mind to lower also the main level here. Right, and again, some compression. Right? Already the drums sound a bit more present, I guess. It's small things, but it makes a lot of difference. Right, again, let's say those two without. With. Of course, it's louder, but there is more character there somewhere. So mid-side processing. And another thing that I wanted to mention, this is it by the way in VCV. Of course, you can add also distortion and everything in this case. Also here you can add distortion maybe before the compression, just to make this a bit more aggressive. You know what, let's do this. Let's use distortion, just a second. Right before the compressor, just because it will react more to the... Right? And now again, if I would change, instead of changing the levels here, I would change the levels. Let's do this actually. -5. Right? It will also go less to the distortion, right? So let's say -6. Right, so now I think the drums sound a bit better than before. Right, if I take away the processing, it's a totally different patch. Let's bring back the level. Listen to the drums. Right, and now maybe they're a bit loud, but you can see what I mean here. So again, this is more or less the processing, but there is something else I want to mention, is that I don't know what music you meant when you said when you listen to other music, the drums are amazing. But don't forget that in the DAW, unlike with modular hardware or VCV rack, you can add so much processing to just the kick drum or just the snare or just everything. You have all sorts of different processing capabilities there that you can add and stack and add samples on one another and really work on the drums to be perfect for this type of music, I guess. So don't forget there is also this. So I guess if you want, you can use also your own samples, or you can buy like drum sample packs and use the samples, and then they will already be punchy and amazing and nice, and you will not have to process them so much. But I like the modular way. I like having something special that is unique, I guess. Yeah, so those are a few things that you can try. Again, the starting sound is really important, is the most important. Changing the levels, actually mixing the different levels before you start with processing. Mixing doesn't have to be just at the end. Mixing is everywhere. Parallel compression might help you. Mid-side processing might help you. And then in the DAW, you might want to process things even more. The next one is from Ganesh, I guess. I had a question about live streaming onto YouTube. There are tutorials out there, but nothing on VCV. I installed OBS, but no luck. A step-by-step would help. So this is definitely an idea for a video. But my setup is a bit different, so maybe it's even a better idea that I make a video about it and share my experience with it. But I'm using OBS only for video. So also now I'm recording this with OBS, but just the video, the audio when I'm recording, and back then when I made also live streaming, I sent all of my audio, the mic, VCV rack, everything I sent into Reaper, and then from Reaper, in Reaper I could process things. For example, sidechain compress my voice with the music so you can hear me better, I hope. And then this is all going from Reaper with a special plugin that Reaper has. It goes to OBS, and OBS is only there for video and to send the information to YouTube, basically, or in this case, record a video. So it is a bit of a different setup what I have. I use Reaper for audio and OBS only for the video aspect, if it's the screen recording or now just like now the camera recording. So it's a bit different. But if you look at tutorials about OBS, because this is exactly what I did, it's not like I downloaded OBS and I knew exactly what to do. So there are tutorials out there that will show you how to set up OBS, the video aspect at least. And then the audio is a bit difficult to send audio from VCV-Rack into OBS. It's tricky, I guess. I use Reaper again. But if someone is watching this and is doing this with OBS only, and you can help us out in the comments, let us know. The next one is from Nathan. Congrats on the album release. Thank you so much. You write that you put together a small setup to record it. I would love to see that setup and also hear a few words about your recording process and any post-performance mixing you might do before sending it to be mastered. So good news, actually, after recording, I recorded this album, Broken Heart of Sand and Stone. I recorded it many months ago. I released it just now, but the recording itself was earlier this year, and I was, I don't know, happy enough with this album that I decided also to record a walkthrough of the setup of how I worked on things, my workflow, and also later on in Bitwig what I did. So there is a video. It will be, hopefully I will publish it on Patreon soon. I'm just thinking when the Q&A will be published. Maybe it was, or maybe there is a chance the video is already on Patreon anyway. And anyway, if you watch it somewhere in the future, the video is already on Patreon. Again, it's a walkthrough video of the setup that I used, of how I recorded things, what I thought about when I composed this album, and also what I did to the tracks in Bitwig later on. Yes, so have a look. It's already there. Should be there, I guess. The next question is from Tobias. Have you ever tried the Modal synthesizer elements clone in VCV? I tested it recently and it sounded quite nice. Was wondering what you would do with it if... Thank you. So yes, I did. There was a time I used it, but you know what? I don't know if the hardware version is the same because I never had the hardware, but there are too many spots for me where it's just painful, I guess, the sounds. I could never really connect with it. It's, I don't know, in my ears it sounds a bit, it's just too harsh, I guess, at times. When I used it, there were two main ways that I used it for. First of all, as a sort of a bass percussive tool, just like I'm doing here. As you can see, I'm triggering it. It will sound like this, right? I'm triggering it and I have lots and lots of modulation. I don't know, this I don't like this sound so much. I don't know. Right, but just as a sort of a percussive bass sound. Which can be quite cool. Right, so this is one way that I used it. And another way that actually I always liked is when you take the mallet all the way up and you send it a high gate, it will sort of be like dropping the mallet on the drum, and it will like jump and have all sorts of randomness and generative hits. Let's say it will sound like this. So this I always liked in generative patches with lots of reverb like I'm doing here, and some modulation, right? So if I just send it, you see an open gate, I'm not doing anything. Right, just the mallet is all the way up. This I don't like so much. I don't know, I find it a bit overwhelming to my ears at least. Right, but those are basically the main uses that I had with it. So first of all, as a sort of a bass, percussive bass voice, and also this generative random hits with lots and lots of modulation and reverb. The next question is from Fick. This might be tricky, but I recently came up with the idea that I'd like a way to create call and answer in my melodies using VCV. On one hand, the call would be a randomly generated sequence of 2 to 4 notes, different signatures but sync to time, and then when this is done, the end of cycle sends the answer to be inverted version or random notes of the call to different voice. This tool would generate endless possibilities of call and answer for me to pick from. I try to do it and my prototype is a bit wonky and sounding clumsy. I have a few ideas for you. So the main tool here is using a burst generator. So a burst generator will send a burst of triggers, and this can be like one voice, and then the end of cycle of it will trigger another burst of triggers that will be the second voice, as sort of a call and response. In this case, I have one sequence, and I'm going to show you, this is the ADDR sequencer, and I'm going to show you why I'm using it. One voice is FM operator, the other one is key call from Behringer. So first of all, you can see I have two burst generators. They are both synced to the clock. One has 7 pulses, the other one 12, so you get different amount. And also this burst generator, it's from count modula, it has also probability. So in this case, there is a 50% chance that the actual burst generator will generate triggers, which means that instead of 7 pulses, there is a 50% chance that it will send 7 pulses. So we get less notes, 2, 3, 4, sometimes depending on the probability. Right, so now what I will do, if I trigger this, right, we've got now 3 notes. Right, we got 2 notes, so all the time it will change. This is the FM operator. And if I send the end of cycle of it to trigger the second burst generator and the end of cycle of it to trigger the first one, right, we get a loop. So the one will end, will trigger the second one, it will end, will trigger the first one, and so on. Right? Even without notes, it's already sounding nice. Now, why I'm using the ADDR sequencer? So I'm mixing both of the pulses with the CV mix, and this is going to the ADDR sequencer. One of them, the first sequence, the first burst generator will be positive. And you can see it's moving forward. I really like this. I'm sorry I'm taking my time here. It's going to be a long video anyway, so let us enjoy this a bit. Anyway, so now this is moving forward, but now if I invert the second burst generator, the sequence will move backward, and this is because the ADDR sequencer has this option, reverse step on negative clock. If you send it a negative clock, it will run backward. So the first burst generator will have steps running forward. The second burst generator, the second voice, will have the steps running backward. So it will play it basically in reverse. So let's do this. Look at the ADDR sequencer. This is really nice. Now all you have to do is record this, randomize the ADDR sequencer, record it again, randomize the ADDR sequencer, record it again, and you have endless possibilities. I have another idea for you, but so let's mute this for a second. Okay, so another idea here is not just to use probability on the burst generator, but also to use semi-random, I guess, to generate notes. So first of all, let's do the same with the end of cycle, right? The end of cycle will trigger the second burst generator, which will trigger the first one, so we have a loop. You can see the probability here is even lower. I have here 25%, right? So it will generate even less triggers. I have it set to 16 in this case. And I'm using the probability key from Impromptu. I'm using actually 2 of them to generate the note information. Now, why I'm using the probability key? Because I can choose the importance of the different notes. For example, the first one will have mostly C, a bit of F, a bit of B flat. The second one, the answer will have mostly B flat, a bit more G, and then a little of F and C. So you can see one will mostly concentrate on the C note, the other one will mostly concentrate on G and B flat, and you will get this call and response, but it will be sort of random. It will always be different notes, unlike with the ADDR sequencer. Right, so again, if I trigger this, right? And again, according to the probability, we'll have more or less if we change this, for example, to 40%. And of course, the sound design, you will have to decide for yourself. Here it's just an FM operator and key call, it's nothing amazing. But you can do this with all sorts of things. If I add drums to this, which I have here a bit, this is really nice. Right, so burst generator is the main tool here. End of cycle loop, so end of cycle to the second burst generator, which will trigger the first burst generator. Use probability to add a bit of space between the notes. And then you can choose if you want the ADDR sequencer to have a sort of inverted sequence, or if you want the probably key to have a bit more control on the notes that are playing, and it will always be a bit different. That's it. The next question is from Gary. I just hit upon a neat trick to have different fade in to fade out speeds by using a latch trigger through a slew limiter to control the volume of a mixer and setting different rise and fall rates. I wondered what other tricks you had in this area. So something, I think also on this there should be already a video, using a clock divider. So instead of a latched trigger, you can use a clock divider with a slew limiter, as I'm doing here. I have 4 oscillators, each tuned to a different note, 4 slew limiters and 4 clock divisions. In this case, it's 11, 13, 17, 19. And this will bring in and out this sort of chord. Right, depending on the division, depending on the slew limiter, you can see they are all a bit different. Which is already nice for generative patch. I have here another example where you can cascade envelopes or function generators. So here I have 4 knocks from Instruo, and I'm using a random source to modulate their rise and fall, or attack and decay. Each of them will control a different sound, a different voice on the mixer, right, as you can see here. And they are cascading, right? So the first envelope, the end of cycle of it, when it's done, it will trigger the second envelope, which will trigger the third, which will trigger the fourth, and the fourth is triggering the first, and the sample and hold. So each cycle, the times will be different, and you get something a bit more generative. So if I activate the first one, or trigger the first one, to start cascading. Oh, I have to unmute this also. This is still the first one. Let's listen to this again. Now it will loop with different times, because the sample and hold will also be triggered. Right? And of course, this doesn't have to be 4 of the same voices. This can be totally different voices, noises, all sorts of samples, if you will, or if you want. Right, and just cascading the envelopes. This works also really nicely in hardware. I know you say, oh, but I need 4 envelopes, There are many modules that are at least 2, Rampage, Maths, There are also modules that have 4 envelopes, and also sometimes you just have 4 envelopes in your system. So this works also really nicely in hardware. If they have end of cycle, you can cascade them. And another trick is using the mind-meld mixer. I think already there is a video somewhere about it. Using the fade in and outs of the mind-meld mixer, right? So here I'm using chances. In this case, it's just muting the voices, right, randomly, right? According to the chances, it will mute the different channels. But in the right-click menu of each channel, there is also a fade function. So let's say the first one will be 5 seconds, the second one 7, then almost 2, and then let's say 3. So now instead of muting and unmuting, they will fade in and out. According again to chances. Right, which can also be quite cool. So again, a clock divider with slew limiter, cascading envelopes, using the mind-meld mixer, fade, and I'm sure there are many more techniques and ideas with this. If you have something you want to add, please leave it in the comments. And that's it. The next one is from Mark. Can you give some advice on creating bell-like sounds? I'd love to be able to use a proper sonorous bong in a piece of music, like a big church bell. Would the same techniques be used for more tuned bells, like a tubular bell style sound, or even something like glockenspiel sound? Yes, so if you want bell sounds, you want to experiment with FM. I got really interesting results with the FM operator, but you can experiment with all sorts of different oscillators. The thing about bell sounds, at least the untuned ones, is that you don't want them to be in tune. So experiment with the different types of FM if you want exponential, linear, or through zero. In this case, it's actually phase modulation. Never mind. With the FM operator, I got really interesting results. So in this case, I have 2 layers, let's say. One FM layer with 2 FM operators, right? One is modulating the other, and another exactly the same. One is modulating the other. So now when I trigger this, it will sound basically like a loud 1 FM operator. Right, nothing too amazing. But now let's start adding FM, right, with the depth, and start detuning the oscillators. Listen to this. I'm just detuning them without thinking too much. This is a nice bell. Right, and the bigger you want it, the more layers you will want. Of course, it's VCV. You can also use polyphony maybe to have less modules on the screen. I would prefer to have the modules just so you can tweak them. Right, tweak also the attack and release here. Listen to this. Right, you can even just use sample and hold. I can do this for hours. Just use sample and sample and hold, and randomize with each hit, and just record it, and then choose the one you like the most and use it as a sample. This can be really great also as a percussive sound for all sorts of weird different patches. But yes, FM operator, create all sorts of layers. You can also modulate the modulator that modulating the modulator. So if I do something like this, although the more complexity you add, the weirder the sound will be, and it will start becoming noise and less bell-like, like this, for example. Right, so you have to keep it simple, but also try all sorts of different combinations of pitch. And stuff like this, and FM amounts, of course. Although also there is a limit until it's already too noisy. But FM operator is your friend in this case. The next one is from Kotter. Thank you for your recent video on recording modulation performances with Remove. I'm hoping to find a technique for similarly recording trigger performances to a gate sequencer. Can you show a way to play sequences and have them recorded and quantized to a grid or the clock? So yes, there is a fun module that you can experiment with. It's called the Big Button Sequencer from Impromptu, of course available for free. There's also the Big Button 2. So the Big Button basically will record triggers and they will be quantized to the clock. And the Big Button Sequencer 2 will record also a CV, so you can use also pitch information, for example. But I will be using the first one, which is for triggers. So you can see I'm sending a clock to it. Now the clock resolution, the clock multiplication you use, this will be the quantization of the triggers. So if you want more resolution, you need a higher clock multiplication. Here I'm using 16th notes multiplied by 4. And here we have also the snap, which will quantize. You can see the quantize the Big Button to the quantize this to the clock. And it has also an input that you can use an external controller or external signals to record into this sequencer. It can go up to 64 steps. In this case, I will go with 32, let's say. And then you have 6 channels that you can use with 6 different voices. So if I start recording, as you can see, I'm really bad at finger drumming, but it is quantized to the clock. If this is not working for you, you can always clear it, and then let's do something else. This was also a bit late, but this is how it is with the mouse. You see, but now I have this sequence recorded. I'm not doing anything anymore. It's recorded here. I can move to the second channel. This will be a hi-hat. You can see also here when it's red, this is the first step, and then it's sort of a metronome. Right? Channel 3 will be an open hat. Right? And like this, you can continue and record. You have to be better than me with finger drumming, because this is really bad, but it is quantized to the quarter notes, 16th notes, sorry, to the multiplied by 4. Right, in this case, we have a length of 32. There are all sorts of different functions here. Maybe I will make a dedicated video. I did a live stream about this a long time ago, and it was really fun, but maybe a dedicated video is also an idea. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. Right, but like this, I just went and recorded. Again, you can use an external clock. You can also have, this might also help you create some sort of a metronome, just to help you keep time. This can be a hi-hat, for example, and you can just to know where the 1 is, or you can just look at this here, this light here. Right, but again, like this, you can go and record, you can use external sequences, you can reset, you can clear everything, and you can change. It's deeper than it looks. And again, there is the other sequencer, the SIC2, which can also record a CV, which might also be interesting. The next one is from Elijah. I would like to know if there is a way to get the CVs coming out of a sequencer to regulate the gate length of a signal. So yes, the gate module, or the gates module rather, from VCV is your friend. You can change the length of a gate, and it has also a CV input. So for example, here I have this sequence, nothing too amazing, right? But let's say that now I want to change the gate length. So I will send this first to the gates module, and then from the gate output back to the envelope. And now I can change the gate length. Right, let's look at this also on the scope. And I can also use the sequencer to sequence the gate length. Let's do this a bit more here. right? Here you can see this on the scope. Right, so this will modulate or sequence rather the gate length of a signal. Again, the gates module is a part of the VCV collection. It has many other interesting functions, but you can also use this to change the width of the length of the gate with CV. The next one is coming from France. I came from a jazz background and have of course told my friends about my adventure into electronic music. Now they're asking if I could do something with the synthesizers where they could play over or with the saxophone, piano, organ and drums. My questions are, what kind of sounds are particularly suitable for this and what kind of chord progressions I could surprise my friends with? So first of all, about the sounds, I remember I used to do this with my flute. Now I'm not playing my flute anymore because I have neighbors in this new studio. But when I played my flute, I used to build like patches in VCV to accompany just so I can play my flute over, like a sort of a playback patch. And I used lots and lots of drones. This gave me the most freedom rhythmically. At least, and also what I could play, just a drone, sometimes also with progressions or like moving notes, but basically drones like pads and stuff like this, because this gave me the most freedom to play over, especially if you have something like drums, then the drummer can do whatever they want, basically. Sometimes I also added like sequences, repetitive sequences, hypnotic repetitive sequences. But then rhythm was less of an option, I guess, because the rhythm was already there, or at least the tempo or something like this. But it gave this hypnotic feel to the sound, which I really, really liked. So I think drones, at least for me, they worked better, especially if you have something like drums, then it gives really freedom to the drummer to do what they want. And maybe also something like hypnotic rhythms, melodic rhythms to build upon, I guess. About chord progressions, I'm really not an expert on chord progressions or anything music theory, so I'm not so sure what you can do. For me, C minor, F minor, G major is like the most used progression. 1/4. 1/4, what is it called? Dominant, whatever. Yeah, you see, I'm not really an authority about progressions. But in VCV, there are a few modules that you can experiment with. For example, there is a just intonation chords module from Doc B that you can create chord progressions in just intonation. This might be interesting. I don't know if it's something interesting, if it's something special, maybe it's what you do all the time, but maybe. Or microtonal chords can also be interesting, especially for drones. You can create all sorts of drones. And if they just play the drums over it, then microtonal can really work. I don't know with the piano if it will work, unless you tune your piano to microtonal intervals. But this might also be a surprise, and this might also be fun. In any case, if you do something and you record it and you think it's nice and you want to share it, feel free to share it with me. Feel free to share it with us on Discord, on the Patreon Discord channel, on Patreon itself, an email, tag me on YouTube, on Instagram, whatever. I'm really curious to listen what you will do and how it will sound like with drums and saxophone and everything. The next question is coming from Slavomir, I guess. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. I'm exploring the world of making music. I found VCV impressive free tool, but I'm missing something. I cannot find a module which makes mono signal stereo with wider sound. To be precise, normally when we hear a stereo sound, we hear it in the middle of our heads. But I would like to make it here far away from our heads. I used Flag Electric Ensemble, but it's not exactly what I need. Do you know a module like this? So there are a few things you can experiment with. This is the original sound. Very mono. So what I'm doing here, I'm sending it to a delay, a stereo delay. Right? A stereo delay. I'm setting the wet all the way up. Feedback all the way down, so we have just one repetition. delay time all the way down. And now all I'm doing is offsetting the channels from one another. So I'm adding delay between the left and the right. This is also called the Haas effect, I believe. And this will make the sound wider in the stereo field. Listen with headphones. Right? All of a sudden it's stereo. Again, without. Mono with a bit wider. Another thing you can do is use filters. So here I'm sending this voice to two different filters. One's low pass, one's high pass. Low pass goes to the left, high pass goes to the right. So you create a difference between the left and the right. Right, and you can change this, of course. Right, so now it's a bit more stereo again without. Red and mono. With the filters, a bit more stereo. Of course, it's modular, you can add modulation, but I believe what you want is a static sound. This is just in stereo field and not something that's moving. Another thing you can try in VCV is the rotary speaker from Surge XT. Right? Mix all the way up, and then when you start, no need for drive, you start taking the Doppler effect up. Right? It will become more and more stereo. It will change the sound also a bit, but it will become more and more stereo. And the last thing you can do is try chorus. I know you tried the flag one, but the flag one adds lots and lots of character, which I like, but maybe for this purpose you don't want it. So the chorus from Surge XT, again, mix all the way up, rate all the way down, depth all the way up. Right, and then with the time, right, it's a bit more stereo, mix all the way down, mono, again with stereo, you can change the width. Right, so those are a few things you can try in VCV to turn your sound to something a bit wider, a bit more stereo, but depending on the sound you use and depending on the effects also that you use after all, after the chain, and what really you mean by as far away from the head, because sometimes maybe lowering the level, sometimes maybe adding panning modulation, sometimes maybe adding reverb can make the sound, the voice sounds further away. But these are some things you can experiment with and try, and maybe they will work for you. The next question is from Lun Gao. I would like to know how to create something as close as possible to this patch in VCV. This is the link, this is the rack, this is the case, basically, and to create something more or less the same in VCV. So Ornament and Crime, this is a multi-purpose module, depends what you want to do, but I'm sure everything you can do with Ornaments and Crime, you can also do with separate modules in VCV rack. TSL is available. I will show you, I built something in VCV, I will show it in a second, but TSL is available in VCV, you can use it. Tangle Quartet from ALM is available, you can use it. STMix is available, you can use it. Microcell, there is Supercell, which is basically the same. And there is also Pamela's new workout now. It's a paid module, but you can buy it and then you have it also in VCV. But again, the Pamela's new workout is can do so many things. In VCV Rack, I created something like this. If we look here for a second, we have here the Quadrat from IntelliGel, which is a mixer, inverter, and all sorts of things. By the way, the headphones and out I didn't include because no need for them in VCV. Right, so in VCV Rack, I added the Molten Modular from the motion meter, from Molten Modular and Befaco. Let me go down a bit here so I'm not too much with my face here on everything. So it's a mixer, it's an inverter, you can use it. It has just 3 channels, but again, it's VCV. If you need more channels, just add another module. Let me zoom in a bit, actually. I added also noise and the quad LFO. This is a chance, more or less. Right, so you can have modulation, you can have sync modulation, you can have rhythms like random triggers, you have noise. Psych is instead of the chord oscillator. Also with Psych, you can create chords. Decline is the scalpel from WMD. It's also an EQ. Again, the TSL is available. The 0-point oscillator, I chose to use the Neoni because it has also a few waves, and it also is through 0 FM. Of course, it's not analog because it's VCV rack. In hardware it is, so it might give you the same results, more or less, I guess. Then there is the filter, the Belgrade filter, which is a twin peak filter. In VCV, you can use 2 tangents, so you have 2 peaks. Again, the Tangent Quartet is available. Instead of the Mimeophone, I used here 2 Prince of Perceptions. You can use also Prism of Perceptions, Prism of Perception, which is stereo, and it has also send and return that you can use, and it will work. The looping and everything will work similarly as in the Mimeophone. It was very much inspired by it. And as a reverb from the Mimeophone, you have here plateau. Added a few more effects, delay and reverb as the FX aid. And again, the ST mix is already available in VCV, so you can use it. Then again, Pamela's new workout, I added clocked, which is the main, I guess, the main users of Pamela's new workout or Pro workout, I guess it's now, as a clock. I don't know, it can do also all sorts of different things. You have to decide what you want to do and then add the modules. I added a few quantizers because I believe you can use Pamela's Pro workout also as a quantizer. So I added also a few quantizers because we have here also the voltage block, which has built-in quantizers or built-in scales. So I added also a few quantizers because of this. You can add more, maybe you will need more. And the digital sequencer from Voxglitch is very similar to the voltage block. You have a clock per sequence. You have here 6, not 8, but still 6 sequences. Gate, here you have also gates, which is also great. CV, length per sequence. So it's also quite cool. And again, instead of microcell, there is supercell, which is more or less the same. It's just bigger, so you can also use this. So this is more or less this rack. If you use it, if you do something with it, please share it with me. I would love to hear what you can do with such a rack. It's quite interesting. Can be great for looping and all sorts of granular, I guess. So please share with me your results with this. The next one is from Neil. I noticed when listening to music, the layers in your voices are many and deep. Could you discuss some interesting layering techniques you know of and use? So there are a few things that I do in hardware. So here I have a simple sequence, right? A simple saw wave going to a low pass filter, nothing too amazing. Right, some things that I will do is I will add a sub-octave. In hardware, I have the flip module, the 1U flip module, which is the Bernoulli gate, which is branches from mutable instruments, which I use a lot as a sub-octave generator. Sometimes I will also use a switch, but basically I send another output of my oscillator into branches, let's say into flip. Right, if I switch this to toggle mode, which I can do also from this button here, and I take the knob all the way to the right, now I will get an octave down copy of this voice, and I mix it in, again without and with. Right, so now I have a thicker voice. Another thing I will do is I will add a wave-folded version of this oscillator. Sometimes I will use a sine wave, sometimes a triangle wave, depends. Right, so let's say I will use a triangle wave. In this case, there is a thero. Right, sometimes also with modulation. Right, but again, without both of them, right? Simple sound, and with a bit more complex, I guess. Another thing I do, and this I do also in VCV a lot, and you're probably already tired from this technique that I'm doing. I'm sending a copy of my low pass filter to a high pass filter, and I send the high pass to a 100% wet effect, which will send only the higher frequencies, the higher sound higher frequency sound into this effect. In this case, it's a delay, which means that only when I open the filter, this will actually go to the delay, which adds a really nice layer. Right, which I really like. I do this all the time. I know you see me do this all the time. It's nothing new, but in hardware, it's quite fun. Also in VCV, it sounds great. Another thing that I'm doing, I'm adding polymeters. I love polymeters. I love having one sequence running, in this case with 8 notes, and having a copy of this sequence running, in this case with 5 notes, so they meet each other at different places. And it's also a sort of another layer. Right, adding another layer, another sound, but it's related, but it's running in a different relation to the first voice. Another one I really like is playing modulation. So what I will do in hardware, I have 2 knocks, but I'm using them usually as modulation. And I play the modulation. So I will, for example, with the filter, I will open the filter modulation and then change the envelope. It's a cycling envelope. Change this sort of an LFO and have another sort of layer. Right, this I will do a lot in hardware. I will always play. And another thing that I like is adding another layer of complexities, mixing in noise in all sorts of places. I really like doing this with modulating the filter cutoff. You hear the noise? Without and with. Right, so adding another layer of complexity. Again, let's see how it sounded like before. Let's take. How can I do this? Just for fun. Did it copy it somewhere? Yes. So let's say it's this one. This is the original sound, and with a bit of reverb, right? This is the original sound. And now with all the layers. Right, so those are a few things you can experiment with. Again, mixing in other waves in all sorts of ways. Using effects on higher frequencies or different frequencies. If you use a bandpass filter, can also be interesting. Adding a polymeter, adding some noise, a few things you can experiment with. And that's it. Thank you again, Patreon, so much for your support and for your questions. And thank you again, PathSet, Kaitomic, JP Lab, and Flag for donating your commercial collections to the monthly giveaways. Once again, if you're a Patreon, come join us on Discord. If you're not a Patreon, come join our community on Patreon and Discord. Thank you for watching. Cheers.